trees are great. We could do
I agree, trees are great.
we could do a like arborist
outdoor
podcast as our next venture. Be nice.
Like alongside this one.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to Athlantic, the show where an American and a Brit take turns crossing the pond to learn about sports culture in the USA and the UK. I am your resident Brit, Harry Collins.
And I am your resident American, Adam Jordan.
And we're coming to you today on the fourth Thursday in November, which to half of our audience, I think is quite an important day. Adam, what are you celebrating?
Today we are celebrating Thanksgiving, and you are celebrating Thursday, I guess.
Yeah, we're still so upset that we lost you. We don't really pay attention to Thanksgiving.
You're not really thankful for anything.
No, because we're so bitter. We're just British people. We're so bitter all the time. Having a conversation about like, hey, what are you thankful for? And everyone's like, nothing. Or like, oh, it's always sarcastic. And we're never like genuine enough. We're not. One thing that I always loved about Americans is that like, you're very authentic. Now, like, that authenticity is, like, transparent to, like, good things and bad things. But I really, in my time living there, I was like, nobody here is being, like, sarcastic or, you know, snide.
So what is it about me that you like then, Harry? What part of those boxes do I check?
That proves the rule. England, British people couldn't do Thanksgiving because we can't stand to be so overtly nice to each other.
Sure.
And it's something that there are some things that we've imported from the US, actually, which is a good theme for a TikTok that we released recently. There's some things that we've imported from the US that like openly reject. I don't care about Halloween. We don't need like the hyper commercialization of like Valentine's Day, but England could stand to like enjoy some Thanksgiving. And sure enough, we've been invaded enough times so that like we could be thankful to somebody. Sorry, oh my god, that I clearly like.
Wait a minute.
The weight of the weight of millennia of British guilt just lifting off my shoulders there. Adam, can I tell you what I am grateful for?
Please.
I'm grateful for today's patron saint, who I cannot wait to know if you've heard of, Emmanuel Adebayor.
I have not, but I'm excited to learn about him.
I would like you to, from baseball or basketball or American football, give me a player who has played for multiple brilliant teams, but has never been good enough to kind of have the career that they had.
Oh man.
I want a mediocre guy that just ended up on good teams consistently.
Oh shoot. That's a very good question. I'm struggling to think of like somebody who just like who like went around to different teams, because like I know people who've gone around to different teams, but I don't know people who've like just kind of like, oh hey, I've happened to win here. I guess you could say the most immediate example I can think of is Kike Hernandez on the he just won a World Series with the Dodgers for the second time, but it's his third World Series because he was also on the Boston Red Sox when they won in 2018. And like, he's a very good baseball player. Like he is a key role player, but he's not like, he does a lot of things well, but he's not like elite. So we'll go with him.
Okay. So Emmanuel Adebayor started his career at, I think, Lens, and then moved to Monaco, then went to Arsenal, then he went to Manchester City, Real Madrid, back to Man City, then he played for Tottenham, who are Arsenal's arch rivals, and then after Tottenham he moved to Crystal Palace. And let me tell you, he wasn't very good. And he just somehow failed upwards to the best team in history and then sort of failed his way back down the hill. He wore, as all of our patron saints do, he wore the number 25 at Arsenal City and Spurs and Palace. So he is our patron saint. He's also responsible for the funniest football celebration of all time.
That's pretty great. What made you'll have to send me the episode or the celebration video, but
yeah, 100%.
that's a pretty good one. I like the addition of the patron saint because I love learning about people. Like I love learning about people that are like a little bit more obscure too. I know that we've had Roberto Clemente and Kaoru Mitoma and Michael Jordan as our patron saints, but
we started the patron saint a little bit too late.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
Like in the 20s. They're only going to get more obscure. I had to like dig around for a good 25 that wasn't somebody that, you know, a little bit more of a fringe like American sports player.
Sure.
So when we're in like the 70s, I cannot wait to see who we have to like dredge up from history. But that's part of the Athlantic charm.
There you go. There you go.
Adam, would you like to talk to me about what an MTE is?
I would love to tell you what an MTE is. Yeah, because as we get into our abbreviated news segment, I realize this is probably something we've definitely not covered on the podcast, but something that I don't even think you and I have ever talked about. But this time of year, back when I was working in, back when I was in my previous role where I was working in college sports and following college basketball every single day, this part of the schedule was always the toughest just because it's like crossover season. You've got basketball and football happening right now, and basketball's on the men's and women's side, so double it. So it's just there's so much going on. But part of it that makes this time of the season also kind of weird is this week of Thanksgiving is you'll have a bunch of different events that are abbreviated as MTEs. Most people don't call them that. It's ESPN refers to it as Feast Week because I guess they lean into the whole Thanksgiving motif. But basically, it's this weird time of year where every college basketball team, men's and women's, they haven't gotten into their conference season yet. They've usually been at the beginning of the season playing some teams that are that they should pretty easily beat if they're, you know, an upper level team, or it's just a very kind of weird time of the schedule. And it's also a time of the year where teams aren't making they're not getting a lot of eyeballs on them. They're not making a lot of money. They're not making a lot of ratings. So one way to combat that is to go to a mixed team event, an MTE, where you basically go, it's almost like a preseason tournament. Like you'll see like a summer tournament that you'll see like teams, like soccer teams go over to, and it'll be like a bunch of random clubs from around the country. I know like when I've played FIFA before, like they'll have a bunch of like made up like European International Cup, and it's like that that sort of weirdness. But with this, they'll like go to all sorts of places. Like there's one in Maui, there's one at the Atlantis Resort in the Bahamas. There's usually they're usually in like warmer weather places, and you'll get like UNC playing Seton Hall or some school like that. This year it was Carolina and St. Bonaventure in the Fort Myers Classic. But then you'll get like a more marquee matchup. So today UNC plays Michigan State, which is like those are two traditionally very like blue blood, as we call them, basketball programs.
I've heard of both of those places.
There you go. Perfect. But so it's also like a nice little like ratings driver for the networks. It's a way for the schools to like, you know, in theory have their players like get to bond because they get to go on this fun trip. It's kind of this weird uncanny valley of the college sports world because it's a tournament, but it's not really a tournament. Like if you win it, you don't win.
I was going to say
anything really. There are tournaments now. There's one called the Players Era Festival, which just came up. It's in Vegas. I think it just started like 2 or 3 years ago, and they like pay the players when they win. Like it's like you get prize money. So like that's that's a thing in college sports. So that's what's happening over here. There's plenty of Thanksgiving football happening today. I think right now, as we're recording, the Lions and the Packers are playing. The Lions play every Thanksgiving. It's a ton of fun. But anyway, we've gone way too far without talking about your national embarrassment of a sporting story, which was I was so excited, and I will say that I also feel I am deserved back pay here because I was so excited to watch my first Ashes, as you encouraged me to do, and so I bought for like, I think it's like $12 a month, a streaming service to watch the whole Ashes. I was told it was going to be 5 days for each test, and I think I got less than half of what I was promised, so I would like my money back, please.
So you use the word like national embarrassment. I would prefer to think of it as the English cricket team magnanimously feeding the underprivileged people of Perth. Because unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. Because as you said, the 5-day first test, which is always at the Gabba, it's always in Perth, it's the one that we really needed to win. Was probably, I asked my dad and he said it was the most embarrassing test performance of my lifetime. I think it's, statistically speaking, like the second or third worst for either team ever. The test was concluded after 2 days, which means some England fans will have bought 3-day tickets, flown out, and not even been able to get in the stadium to watch anything on the third day. It also means that, and this was a fun sort of theme on social media, England did so poorly that there was so much leftover food and alcohol at the stadium that it all needed donating to a cost of something like 4.5 million Aussie dollars. Which is like, I think about 3 million US dollars. So they made a huge loss. I like to think of it as game theory. If we lose this one by so much that it cost Australian cricket 3 million quid, later on they're just not going to be well financed. So in a couple of tests' time, when they're poor, they're broke because they ran out of money on the first test. Maybe England recover.
Whatever you got to do to cope with this first test. We can say maybe the boys were just feeling a little more pressure, just knowing that I was watching. That could be part of it too. We'll talk about the Ashes in depth more once it's over. But
we've put it on the calendar. We're going to talk about that right around Christmas. This was also the one that we could have won. It's the one that we needed to win, but Australia were missing some key players, and now both teams' bowlers did really well, but Australia batted really poorly in their first innings, and then we batted really poorly in both innings, and it was humiliating. If Athlantic ever makes money, you can have the first $8 to pay you back for that. For that subscription. Just before we get onto the meat and potatoes of today's episode, I want to quickly talk about sort of shifting national embarrassment to something that happened today, which was what happens when we have too many American owners in English football. I love America. It's not a surprise to anyone. We do this. It's all I talk about. It's half my personality.
You're calling the game soccer now.
I call
a lot of ways.
That whole TikTok.
Yeah.
I called it soccer. I love America and I love football and I love the MLS because it's the fusion of the two. I do though draw the line at American influences into the English game, which is a lot about what we talked about in the last episode, a lot about what I talked about on the TikTok last week. And one of the things that I've actually said to you is we need to kind of prevent the saturation of American owners in English. Specifically, I'm talking about English because I'm English, but European leagues, because a lot of these leagues are structured so that you need a certain majority to change rules. And once you get that certain majority, things can develop very quickly. And what we're seeing is if that majority is made up of American owners, typically the anticipated rule changes will match American sports and the American model of sports, which we talked about in episode 15. Okay, done. Right. So 11 months ago, Sheffield United were bought by COH Sports, which is an American, I think a consortium, but they now have American owners. Great. Sheffield United needed new owners. They want to challenge for the Premier League. Fine. That's a good thing. Everyone was very excited and they brought a lot of money and they spent well. They were unlucky not to get promoted to the Premier League this year. Sheffield, which is a fabulous English city, has another team, Sheffield Wednesday. United play in red and white. Wednesday play in blue and white, like this bear.
Yep.
Both are incredibly historic teams, but they are bitter rivals. And Sheffield Wednesday went into administration about a month ago, which means basically a third party came in, took control of the club to kind of sell off assets to try and generate some revenue so that the club itself can survive after years of poor ownership.
And their fans like responded to it really, really well too.
Oh, it was amazing. Go on.
Yeah, didn't they like go in and like they like immediately like they boycotted the ownership for like until basically they went into administration, and then all of a sudden the wallets came out and they started buying up everything in the club shop. They started like putting a bunch of investing into the club as fans, and like just to kind of send that message of we need better ownership. Yeah, Sheffield fans earned my respect, or Sheffield Wednesday fans earned my respect. And low-key bucket list item for me, I would love to go to a derby in Sheffield one day if they can ever line it up.
It's such an amazing city, and those two teams are also among the oldest teams in England, which means the oldest teams in the world. They are truly amazing. But what happened this week, while the club is in administration, they are looking for new owners, and there are interested parties such as Mike Ashley, who used to own Newcastle, not a good football owner. He wouldn't be good for any small team like this. I say small team, any team in financial peril like this, but. Apparently today, one of the representative from COH Sports, the owner of Sheffield United, inquired about buying Sheffield Wednesday with a plan to merge the teams, which is a frighteningly American idea, because Sheffield is a city of less than a million people, and you've got two teams in the same league, which means they share the same market. So, we see Sheffield is not big enough to sustain multiple markets like New York is with the Giants and the Jets, for instance. So the idea to fuse them makes financial sense. But if you're a Sheffield United fan and your owner is not in touch with your club's culture enough to know that even thinking, let alone letting that thought trickle down onto your tongue and saying it to somebody, the idea to try to purchase or try to benefit Sheffield Wednesday, you have completely discredited yourself as the owner of that team. And what we're seeing now is huge outcries. People are wondering if it's a spoof, if it's some sort of if actually it's it's a tactic by somebody at Sheffield Wednesday to just drum up interest to get a panic buy. But it's just one of those. If it's not true, which I don't think, I think it is a genuine. If it's not true, they've very well read into English paranoia about American owners.
Sure.
And if it is true, it only enforces British paranoia about American owners.
Yeah, truly.
So either way, it's a real mess, and I can't imagine. That would be such a crime against football and a crime against an amazing sporting city. But what a fascinating thing to happen just today. Yeah. And it's unprecedented.
Yeah, when you said when you messaged me about that, or when you told me about that, I was shocked. It's definitely something. It's also something who did you say was the person who said this? Are they a part of COH, or are they
So the inquiry to the administrator came from a COH email address.
I wonder if which
is verified.
We don't know. That also could be anybody within there just trying to get a message out. It could be somebody you don't know how much and again, I have not looked into this. I don't know who this person is. I don't know if we know like their title or what they do, but like it also could, like, we don't know how much influence that person necessarily has, but the fact that the ideas come up, I think is definitely is definitely alarming. Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't know if I don't want it to come off as like I'm defending this, because I'm not, but I will say I don't know about, and it's not something that feels very like American sports. Like I feel like the American thing to do would be if you knew that if there were two teams in a city and a market couldn't handle both of them, one of those teams would just move like you would buy and move. Yeah.
Sure.
But and rather than like merge the teams, although I'm sure something like that has happened in the history of American sports, it does speak to, and you mentioned it, kind of this American idea of kind of looking at it or at least this very capitalistic idea of looking at these things as a growth asset, looking at clubs as growth assets rather than community institutions, or, if you look at it as both, because I would hope that nobody is truly heartless enough to completely not see the fact that there's a community element here to it, but allowing that to kind of be squashed down, I feel like is definitely a very like American capitalistic piece, which like, you're right to be concerned about. Like if you can have American ownership, but like you don't want these people to just treat it without care. So well said, we'll keep an eye on it, but I do want to get to the next piece of this. We'll spend, the next half hour or so talking about a question that I asked Harry a couple weeks ago, because it's something that's been on my mind for a while, and that is this a very historical and darker aspect of football culture in the UK, and that is the culture of hooliganism, which is a very silly sounding word, but something very serious. So Harry, I know that we have thoughts on how we're structured, or we've thought carefully about how we want to structure this, so I'll let you take it away.
So I think in your introduction there, you've done a good job of sort of setting how both of us felt about hooliganism before we even started looking really at planning this episode. And one thing that I would like to start with is actually getting your perspective on what that word means, because objectively the word hooligan is like kind of a funny sounding thing. And like, especially when it's said in like a received pronunciation, British accent, hooligan, like hoopla or like, it doesn't sound serious.
Yeah.
But it is no exaggeration to say this is absolutely the worst part of football. And it has been for decades, and it's grown in the UK, and then it's gone elsewhere, and then it's coming back. And what's really frightening is that this is like a child of English supporter culture, which is something I love and something you are fascinated by. And what I would like to do after we go through a bit of necessary history is kind of talk about where supporter culture in America and England is clearly separated.
Yep.
Because is anything, well, no, we'll get to the question about does hooliganism exist in America later on.
Yep.
But actually, like, what does hooliganism mean to you just as an American sports fan?
Yeah, first we have to define it. But I will say, don't have to hedge there. I also love UK supporter culture. Yeah. So like, it's not just something I'm fascinated by, but yes, it is. We do definitely need to kind of lay out what this is at first, because I think I definitely, and I'm not going to speak for all Americans, but I think that a lot of Americans who kind of hear about it don't really necessarily understand it in its full depth. So so the word hooligan, I think, is almost like it's a word that's associated with a parody of like an old man talking about, the young whippersnapper kids who are up to no good, and they're just, rowdy
Sure.
rascals going out and,
Yeah, that's
causing a ruckus. So I think that's kind of how most of us think about it. I mean, when I kind of think about it, I'll speak for me. It's kind of a bit of a caricature. Again, I kind of think of, through the, the late 60s, the 70s to the 80s, like kind of spanning the like Wilson, Heath, Thatcher eras of like the UK, and all of the political and social unrest at that time. And I just kind of think of it as like there are these especially working class football fans going around and just kind of like beating the crap out of each other and like basically taking those like songs and everything, but like to another level and like actually like being violent toward each other. And I take it in the context of like, again, all of the kind of more like working class economic like downturn of that time. And yeah, I really more associated with that. And like, yeah, I imagine, and one of the questions I have for you is like, how did it occur in London versus places that were, more rural? And yeah, I think of it again, like the Clash is always playing in the background when I think of it.
Yeah. See, so that's your answer there is perfect, because you both identify actually the severity of it, but it's really hard to separate hooliganism away from like this modern romanticized memory of it, like the Clash playing over the top of it. Yeah, that's kind of, that sort of London punk rock soundtrack, which we can still use to like evoke, positive, nostalgic emotions. What was concurrent with hooliganism. Except I don't think anyone that made that sort of music would be proud to have it be the anthem of such violence and such terror. Now, it's interesting that you said it's like a caricature of an old person describing like a young ragamuffins, because hooligan is a word from the early 20th century, and it was originally used by police to refer to violent street gangs. That's not cute.
No,
that's
not at
kind
all.
of terrifying. But that word is of a time, and it's kind of amazing that word never changed, because the word hooligan, if it had such negative connotations, it's interesting that through the evolution of football violence, that word has actually become more and more appropriate, which is really upsetting.
Yeah.
So yeah, as we've alluded to, hooliganism is a term broadly used to describe disorderly, aggressive, and violent behaviour at sports events. But regrettably, it is now so closely associated with violence at football matches over the past 60 years that is just hooliganism is just violence at football.
So okay, so that's it. So that's our definition of hooliganism is
hooliganism. Yeah.
Is simply it is violence that happens as a result of football.
Yeah,
that what we're saying.
It's not just and unfortunately, as we'll see, it's not just at football. It is now on the football's periphery.
Oh, interesting.
Throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, it became more and more peripheral, and now in the 21st century, it's starting to come back to being more centered around the game itself. But yeah, when trying to examine the root of hooliganism, it's unfortunately necessary to start with the sport of football itself and any team sports sort of culture and characteristics.
Okay.
Because like any team sport, your chanting, your local songs and your anthems, the flags that you fly at the games, the club's imagery, the club's colours, they all link to your team and that specific team's area. And these all have become indicators for like localized patriotism and a deep-rooted link to a specific identity and what becomes like a pseudo-nationalism.
So it basically becomes like a turf war.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we can all appreciate that these elements of sport teams are not of team sports are not inherently problematic.
No.
Like a football club having a logo is like necessary, and all of these like the anthems and the colors and the crest, those are all like effectively, if we want to be really sterile about it, they're all like just like marketing elements.
Yeah, totally.
They're just selling a brand, and a
Exactly.
supporter is nothing much more complicated than a customer.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
and we
I don't know
just-
if you're familiar with the old Jerry Seinfeld bit that he had, where like he talks about that being a sports fan, you're basically just rooting for the clothes. You're not like rooting for because like if a player goes and leaves somewhere else,
Yeah.
and you're a fan of the team, you're gonna stay
Yeah.
a fan of the
I don't
team.
care about
So
him.
it's
Yeah.
you're rooting for the clothes, you're rooting for the colors, you're rooting for the crest, exactly. Which like that's what we love. Like it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. That like we love. That's
Yeah.
what we love about football. We love that it can build community. But yeah, it can definitely. I can see how that could build the wrong kind of community very quickly.
Sure. And what's the problem is, and the one of the things that we love about sports and specifically football is the powerful emotions that it evokes. That sort of brand loyalty starts to get conflated with like personal identities, and under
Sure.
specific environments, these identities are pushed together through different circumstances, which are typically socio-economic or political. Paul Gow and Joel Rookwood, who are both at Liverpool Hope University, found that involvement in football violence can be explained by factors including identity and power. And other studies have also shown strong political links to religion, ethnicity, and most potently to class.
Interesting.
So it isn't hard to track the growth of hooliganism against changing socio-political landscapes in Britain. Now, there is definitely hooliganism in Glasgow is far more religion-based. That is Protestantism
okay.
versus Catholicism between Rangers and Celtic. There will still be class and socio-economic factors there, but it is far more sectarian. However, football hooliganism in the majority of Britain really started to take hold in the 1960s. Now, it did happen in the 19th century. While Corinthian FC were gallivanting around the world, spreading this Corinthian idea of playing properly with good manners, at home, violence in football was kind of starting.
Sure.
The first recorded instance of real violence at football was in 1885, following a friendly game, ironically a friendly game between Aston Villa and Preston, where the Preston players and coaches specifically were attacked, not the fans. But seemingly the Preston fans caught the bug, and the following year attacked a group of Queen's Park fans at a train station away from a football ground. Oh. So the cat's out of the bag. Fan on fan violence, that sort of tribalism. It's here and it's started. And you'd be hard pressed to say that in the late 1800s that a culture was forming. Sure. And this continued throughout the first half of the 20th century because, Adam, pop quiz, what happened twice globally in the first 50 years of the 20th century?
I think it involves a lot of explosions and guns and maybe some people that wanted to kill other people.
Yeah, and we kind of need to cling to this point because this will come back later on. Of course, in the first half of the 20th century, we had two world wars. Number one, they both ravaged Britain economically and obviously literally. And number two, a huge sense of national unity. But when the Second World War finished, the British Empire had dissolved. England was. I need to make sure that I use Britain here because it's not just an English problem. But if I conflate the two, please forgive me. Britain is battered and bruised, and everyone's paying for it. Rationing in the UK continues into well into the 1950s, and we will do an episode on wartime sports. But basically, following the Second World War, there is pride and there's perseverance, but Britain has to reckon with a new global position, and so we sort of lick our wounds and we get through it.
And to your point, like I don't want to discount the fact that like the empire is like you said, like pretty much dissolving, almost fully dissolved by the 50s.
Sure.
At least as we know, you could argue that the Commonwealth is, an empirical sort of entity now. But like, it's a big shift. For worse, for better or for worse, probably for better, that is a big shift.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
To the national identity of a country who had been pillaging the world for more than a century,
and specifically for the personal identities of traditionally masculine men in Britain, because after the 50s that we get through, and the 50s is a bit of a grind, we reach the 60s, and the 1960s are known so well for the emergence of so many fundamental pieces of the modern British puzzle. It's the decade of social progression. We got the contraceptive pill in 61. We got the race relations bill in 65. You can have legal abortions, legal divorces. You can have legal gay sex. While Harold Wilson was busy liberalizing the country, the Beatles and the BBC were busy showing it off to the world. We got miniskirts and mods and rockers. We got Concorde, and we even won the World Cup. The cultural revolution in Britain in the 1960s was massive and powerful and fast-flowing, and it meant that many more people were empowered. But as we see in every social revolution, when more people are empowered, those in traditional positions of societal power are marginalized. And that's where this social friction, that is the tinder, that is the kindling for the fire that will be hooliganism.
Oh God, there's a through line here from hooliganism to reform and Nigel Farage. Oh no.
Oh, it's coming up.
Oh no.
So we reach the 1960s, and Britain takes on huge immigration. These societal changes are threatening to the traditional masculine groups. These are also people that likely contributed during the war. So in the middle of, and the other thing is, like, after the Second World War, we had the baby boom. So there's a bunch more people as well. So this profound shift in societal dynamics saw the rise of these new subcultures and marginalized those masculine groups. There was a Conservative MP called Enoch Powell who gave this Rivers of Blood speech, which highlighted significant racial tensions in the UK.
Rivers of Blood?
Rivers of Blood, yeah. He referenced the Tiber in Rome for like the lack of purity of like a population, because England was taking on we had this amazing surge of Caribbean and African migration to the UK, and it's one of the things that makes specifically London such a rich cultural place to be right now. But of course, again, the traditionally powerful communities feel threatened. So we get this repulsive Enoch Powell speech. And then Bob Pennington was a columnist for the News of the World. He said this of actually specifically Everton fans in the 1960s. The lunatic fringe of support that fastens onto Everton are seeking identification in a multinational port where roots are hard to establish. So these traditionally masculine groups are losing their ties to their cities and therefore cling to their ties to sport.
Interesting.
And the sports teams replace the the geographical identity. Now, obviously, that's not a healthy geographical identity if it's so fragile like that, but it means that what is a traditionally masculine area anyway, football, albeit we need to talk about women's football in both wars, but we won't do that now. We will do that later. These already masculine and problematic communities, suddenly the pressure gets turned up.
So they take their frustration, channel it into support for this club, but then make it physical, make it violent.
Yeah, and the problem is when you get enough like-minded people, as you've just said, who take those frustrations and want an outlet, that's where the firm was born. The firm. Now,
okay.
A firm, yes. So the firm was born in the pressure cooker of the 1960s and is what the hooliganism was coined the English disease. And that was before firms really came up. If hooliganism was the English disease already, then the advent of the firm turned it into the English pandemic.
Is the firm because the only British firm I know is the royal family. So is a firm like an organized
similar
hooliganism?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Where particularly marginalized men turned when they needed family and they needed fraternity and support, they turned to firms. And firms were basically organized armies with their own culture and their own hierarchy and their own history, which devoured these vulnerable, isolated men's appetite for belonging and identity. So firms are attached to, parasitically attached to football teams. They are not organized by the football team. That needs stressing. They are communities, sub-communities of football team fandoms.
Is it kind of like, and maybe you'll get into this, so apologies, but is it kind of like ultra groups in other parts of Europe?
So the ultras are the Italian version of a firm.
Okay.
They are, and unfortunately, it appears as though Italian football lifted the idea for ultras from English firms.
Okay.
And firm, as you pointed out, is exactly that sort of organization, that sort of almost familial. Everyone knows each other deeply, and there is a recognized hierarchy. As you mentioned, like the royal family is called the firm. If viewers or listeners have watched Peaky Blinders, that is not. Do not conflate Peaky Blinders with football hooliganism, but the Peaky Blinders depicted in the show, that is a firm.
Okay.
A very clearly structured, organized group of people. Obviously, the royal family aren't violent, but in this case, these are groups of they are. These are groups of people with structured leadership that are just targeting organized violence. Firms plagiarized military rankings and discipline. Their leaders would ascend to the top of the firm by proving that they're a good fighter, or through sheer charisma, or because they just knew how to organize.
Reminder, we're talking about supporting a football club.
Yeah, and now we're talking about small communities within the fandom of a football club who are just using almost football as an excuse for violence.
Yeah, I was going to say, at what point does this get violent? But now I can see if they're organizing by, fighting skill and, ability to rile people up, I can see.
Exactly. And if there were one firm across the whole country, that's probably an issue that you can take care of. But not almost every team, many teams had firms, and some teams had multiple firms. Some of the most famous includes the West Ham Intercity firm. The Intercity was a train that literally ran, on the mainline railways in England. The Intercity train is like a brand. I think it was blue and yellow, And like the West Ham firm took that name because they are now projecting this idea of invasion against other teams' supporters, against other firms. We had the Millwall Bushwackers. Millwall are kind of credited with starting the first firms. They are almost certainly, along with West Ham, the most famous football hooligans throughout history. The Chelsea Headhunters, also an early one. The Manchester United Red Army, and the despicably named Burnley Suicide Squad were these like notorious gangs of football fans who are just looking to fight each other. And if they don't fight each other, they just fight just often members of the public and anyone wearing the other team's colours.
Sure.
They would trash trains, they would trash pubs, they would incite violence against local police. There's a brilliant podcast series by Tony Bellew, who is a Liverpoolian. He's an Everton supporter, so I'm sure you wouldn't want him to be described as he's a Scouser, but he's a boxer. He was one of England's best boxers of the last 20 years, and he's got this great podcast called Gangster, and in it he talks to former hooligans who recount stories of deliberately stopping the trains using emergency brakes so that they could force their way off the trains and jump fans who are waiting for them at the station.
Oh my God.
They would run down the tracks. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy and it's haunting. So yeah, we reached this hyper problematic, toxic element of football supportership. And this is the apex of the worst part of football.
So yes, 100%. But the way these are organized and there's these attacks happening, I'm sure there were instances where these blew up a little bit more, and I hope people didn't die, but I would be shocked if nobody did.
So throughout the 70s, injuries were incredibly common. There are far too many anecdotes and stories to tell about just even innocent bystanders getting caught in violence. People who are just in a pub quietly drinking when it gets invaded by a firm, torn to shreds, and the people inside get very hurt. Happens all the time. This issue gets worse and worse, and the English disease gets worse and worse throughout the 70s, up to 1985, which is the single worst year in certainly football, in British football history.
Whoa.
In 1985, Liverpool played Juventus in Brussels in a stadium called the Heysel Stadium, during which a group of Liverpool hooligans jumped the fence between the Liverpool fans and the Juventus fans. It is key to remember this is a neutral stadium because it is the European Cup final. These fans are here to watch what should be the best game of the season and a historic game for their club. But this group of Liverpool fans attacked the Juventus fans, causing a huge crush as the Juventus fans flee to get away from the violence. The police would not let them out of the exit and would not let them onto the pitch. So this crush pushed against a 6-inch wide wall, which then collapsed. 600 people were injured and 39 people died.
Oh my God.
It is comfortably the blackest day in English football when talking about the results of hooliganism.
Yeah.
And the day after it happened, Margaret Thatcher called members of the media who were present to 10 Downing Street, and within 6 months had legislation enacted to start counteracting hooliganism. Later that year, we also had the Valley Parade disaster, which had nothing to do with hooliganism. Valley Parade is the Bradford City Stadium, which caught fire and burned down. This was like months afterwards. 56 people died, and it started an inquest into stadium safety. On the same day as the Valley Parade disaster, there was a game between Leeds and Birmingham where a 15-year-old boy was killed during hooligan violence.
Oh my God.
It would be a far more famous story if it didn't happen on the same day as the second worst stadium disaster in British history. Unfortunately, that means that we should talk about the single worst stadium disaster in English history, in British history, which of course is Hillsborough.
Yeah.
Was
that hooligan related?
It's very important to say it's not hooligan related, but it was blamed on hooliganism. 96 people obviously lost their lives at Hillsborough, the worst stadium disaster in British history, due to the South Yorkshire Police complete ineptitude to handle large crowds. Too many fans tried to enter the stadium. They should not have been allowed to. However, that is not their fault. The way that they were policed was appalling, and the crush that ensued at Hillsborough was contained far too long in far too small an area where there were obvious ways of releasing the pressure. Following the unprecedented number of fatalities, the South Yorkshire Police blamed it on hooliganism. And for the next 40, 50 years, we have had inquest after inquest. And finally, about a decade ago, the South Yorkshire Police took responsibility for it. Unfortunately, it's generations too late.
Sure.
This is how bad hooliganism became. Number one, 39 people died in Brussels. That's not even in Britain,
right,
for our geographically challenged friends. Secondly, the Hillsborough disaster was blamed on hooliganism, which at the time was accepted as a likely cause of almost 100 people dying.
Yeah.
That is how bad this has gone.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the apex of hooliganism. Now, Margaret Thatcher is an incredibly divisive human being. My feelings on her are strong and not relevant, but she immediately turned to tackle the problem. It is also worth saying English teams were banned by UEFA from European football for 5 years following
God.
the Heysel disaster.
Also, I'm sorry. This is a bit of an aside, but you're saying that Margaret Thatcher went on to like tackle the problem, and I'm picturing just like, thank God this was before television was what it was. But like, or at least like political ads. But I'm totally picturing like if this were happening like 10 years ago, or honestly even now, there'd be some like commercial of like Margaret Thatcher like running up to like some fans that are like some hooligans that are beating her and just holding up the red card.
Showing a red card, yeah.
That would happen.
Yeah. So the political response from Thatcher was swift and nuclear.
Ooh.
On the one hand, she passed. It normally takes about a year, if not a year and a half, if it's going to pass, to get a bill through Parliament. Thatcher got the Sporting Events Control of Alcohol Act passed within 3 months, and the Public Order Act of 1986 passed the following year.
Oh, wow.
The first of those is the reason why British football fans cannot drink alcohol within view of the pitch.
Okay.
To prevent, because alcohol and Class A drugs exacerbate this issue tenfold.
Sure.
So now that's supposed to stem the amount that somebody can drink before watching a football match. And if you reduce alcohol, the kindling that is bone dry doesn't get doused in petrol. The second act, the Public Order Act of 1986, permitted courts to ban supporters from grounds for life.
Oh, wow.
Now we have a deterrent.
Sure.
Many hooligans were banned for life. And of course, you rip them out of that community that they were A, a part of, and B, were reliant on. And a lot of these people have gone on to like write books or give seminars on that time of history. Like there is like reform in those individuals.
Good to know. Yeah.
We later got the Football Spectators Act and then the Football Offences Act in 1991, which created specific criminal offences for throwing missiles onto the pitch. While we were writing the notes for this, I used the word missile, and you were like, "A missile." Do you want to grace yourself before I
go ahead?
A missile. The word missile was used long before we had rockets with bombs on.
Yeah,
you know that, right?
yeah. No,
okay, good.
I know that I know that there wasn't some dude just like tossing like
tomahawks,
a tomahawk, exactly. But it was just funnier. Okay, so this is, and I want to be conscious of our time because I want to be conscious of our time here. That's sort
of the history.
That's crazy. That is crazy. That like, as this systemic thing that like it's not like those systemic issues that caused hooliganism or like the systemic causes of hooliganism like just went away. It was just purely like, I mean, sure, I guess like you get generations removed from it or like a generation's removed from like the onset, but like I mean, just coming down that hard, I mean, I guess it worked. I guess you can argue, who was kind of caught up in the collateral there for sure. Yeah. But good.
Well, the legislation worked, firstly. Unfortunately, and this comes back to Margaret Thatcher's character, Margaret Thatcher is famous for many, many things, one of which is her sort of enemy within stance.
Oh, yes.
Where she would refer to the IRA striking miners, as in
Billy Elliot,
coal miners who don't want to, who won't work without improved pay, not hitting kids,
not children,
and football hooligans. She recognized those three communities as three that are core to what she called the societal decay of Great Britain. And this is in the gangster podcast I mentioned earlier. One of the core reasons that Thatcher moved so quickly after the Heysel disaster wasn't necessarily the issue of hooliganism across the UK, or across Britain, it's that this hooliganism event took place internationally.
Yeah.
And it was an enormous scourge, an enormous stain on the global perspective, the global opinion of Great Britain. And that seems to be one of the key reasons why Thatcher acted so quickly.
Sure.
So the legislation did work, albeit the criminalization of these activities led to this sort of subculture of football fans being kind of regarded more poorly, which still actually continues today. But the real healing in football came from within football's central communities. Positive fan groups, clubs disowned firms and hooligan fans, and now sort of pivoted far more towards family-friendly atmospheres.
That's good.
What also happened in 1991-92 is B-Sky founded the Premier League, and suddenly a huge amount more money was introduced to football, which tore the old football first division out into the spotlight again.
Yeah.
Because while all of this was going on, even though Liverpool, this is unbelievable, the Heysel disaster did not suspend or cancel the game. The game went on after the fatalities.
Whoa.
And Liverpool won. Yeah, that's disgusting. That's crazy. But even though Liverpool won that game, English football was nowhere near as good as it was now.
Yeah.
The best teams in the 80s and the 90s were in Italy and Germany. So yeah, kind of on the one hand, it's like when people talk about how America came out of the Great Depression. Was it FDR or was it actually just the Second World War? people talk about whether hooliganism kind of came to an end in the UK because Thatcher went nuclear or because football became so much more valuable.
Yeah,
Like,
can probably
did the
be a
market
little...
really end the violence? That's a crazy suggestion, but that's probably true.
Probably a little bit of it. I mean, you're going to have owners that are going to be more protective of that investment for sure.
Precisely.
Yeah, I could totally say. I'm sure there's the truth is in a little bit of both. So,
I
I know, and again, being mindful of the time here, I know that there's still pockets of violence today, but
yeah,
it feels like what we have known. Hopefully this isn't a take that ages poorly, but is this violence is kind of for the most part over for the mainstream.
Yeah, I think there have been specific instances since COVID. Specifically, there was a rush on Wembley Stadium when we hosted the Euro finals, where the word hooliganism was sort of catapulted back into the zeitgeist. Also, European footballing communities seem to be having a far tougher time with hooliganism abroad. You mentioned the ultras in Italy earlier. Marseille are a team that frequently play in Europe. They are well known for having parts of that city where foreign fans should not go. However, sometimes they go there deliberately, looking for a bit of a fight. That still exists. And also, like, the way that alcohol turbocharged hooliganism in the 70s and 80s, now, like, this epidemic of cocaine, this endemic that we have in cocaine and football is turbocharging smaller, modern football violence. Albeit we have far better mechanisms for handling it. Now, I posited this earlier. Now I'd like to bring this back. The way that British fans feel about football is not unique. Football and sports supportership is a common thing around the world, but it doesn't seem like around the world ever communities conflate personal identification, personal identity with sports team identity in the same way that these fragile masculine Brits did in the 60s. So how different and where do you think the separation between sports supportership exists in America, where violence is... first question, is there ever any violence sort of between fans at American sports events? Why does hooliganism not really exist in America to the extent where the word hooliganism is, that silly sort of caricature we mentioned earlier, that's clearly there's a massive separation there. So where did America go right?
Yeah, I mean, like, so it's definitely there definitely are like clashes, but not to that level. It's
Sure.
kind of like you're able to kind of discard those as individual specific situations.
Now, we covered this a little bit in episode 12, I believe, which was our away days episode. Obviously, the really terrifying thing about hooliganism is that these firms move across the country to watch their team and therefore come to a new town and sort of invade that town, and that's where violence begins. Do you think the sort of far smaller...
big the country is?
Yeah,
probably.
If you want to dig up the lead. Far fewer people travel to watch their team. A Miami fan isn't going to watch the Dolphins in Seattle.
It's a very good point.
Far less often than even like Manchester down to London. That's a train. That's a 3-hour train instead of a 7-hour flight.
Yeah, maybe like
the accessibility.
Maybe we're just so big that it's not as much of an issue. And like, again, this goes back to like how fans identify with teams over here. It's more so college sports and less so professional sports, where people like, obviously there's a ton of passion in professional sports, but like most people feel like an identity to their college team if they went to that college. So so you don't really see it in the professional ranks. That's a really, really good theory, and I want to chew on that a little bit more. But for now, I think we have to get to the 2-minute warning here.
Sure.
I am excited to continue pulling at some of those threads that we learned in this episode. Thank you, Harry, for a terrific lesson on hooliganism. So our 2-minute warning question today is a very fun one, and I want to be specific here. It's, if you could have any sports superpower, what would it be? And I'm talking like sports specific. So I'm not just saying that you can read people's minds so that you know what's happening, like what the other coach or the other players are thinking. I want to know, like, if you could hit a golf ball further than anybody, that kind of thing.
Sure. My answer would be, and I'd like you to qualify if this is okay.
Okay.
I would like to be able to precisely control how much I spin balls, sports balls.
Okay.
I would like
That's a good one.
Kicking, hitting, or throwing. I don't care about my power. I don't care about like loft or anything like that. I think a part of specifically ball sports where you can get really interesting gains would be in like how I spin a ball.
Yeah.
Obviously, throwing a football, you want to spiral. But like at tennis, how you spin the ball is so critical. Playing golf, if you like knowing how to put like spin and like drawing and fading a ball.
Yeah.
I want to be able to, and like baseball when you're pitching, how baseball pitchers can throw with like their knuckles to get like spin. My power would be any ball I come across, I can spin it however I want.
That's a really good one.
What would be your sports superpower?
Mine, I think there would be some parts of it that would be related to that, but mine, I want to be able to control my body in space to perfection. So what that means is like, I want to be able to have like perfect sense of like where all parts of my body are at any given time, so that I can like react and know exactly how I'm positioned. Like I'm thinking like as like a goaltender, a goalkeeper or something, like knowing that you're angled just the right way to block a shot or stop a rebound, or knowing in football, in American football, like that I am positioning my body in just the right way to make a catch and keep my feet in bounds at the same time.
Sure.
Or
is that not called hand-eye coordination?
Hand-eye coordination, yes, is a part of it, but I also think like it's not just like literally your hands and eyes; it's all parts of your body. Sure. So like I'm sure hand-eye coordination would definitely go into that, but I'm thinking like just basically knowing like where, like just having precise control of every single part of my body.
In your mind's eye, what sport would you play where this like gives you the biggest differential?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like that's the thing. That's why, it's because I think it applies really well to every sport. But
sure,
I would say probably American football. Probably again any sport that involves like goalkeeping or goaltending.
Yeah.
I think that would be highly advantageous, or really just in general, like any sport where I feel like basketball defense would be really advantageous for that. So I think that's a fun one.
All right, nice one. And that is the final whistle on episode 25.
A quarter century.
Love to know. That's a quarter of a century, which is more than most England cricketers hit last week. I would like to know if anybody has any other ideas about, number one, how Adam could use his sports superpower, and what sports superpower our listeners and our watchers would have. Please leave that in the comments below this video, or in a review to this Spotify track. We are on Spotify TikTok and YouTube, and we would
And
love
Instagram.
a like, and Instagram. Yes, we're on Instagram now, and we would love a like, a follow, or a subscribe on each of those platforms. We are very excited about what we've got planned for 26 and 27, taking us well into the festive period. But until then, I want to say thank you so much for listening, and a good night from me.
And happy Thanksgiving from me.